Welcome everyone, this is DerekJ Speaks, and today we are talking about the AEW New Japan Pro Wrestling Super Show Forbidden Door 2023, the second edition of this Forbidden Door pay-per-view, and much like last year's edition, this year, all hits, no misses, one of the best wrestling pay-per-views of any company all year. Top to bottom, one of the strongest cards on any pay-per-view, just full of countless incredible matches, including the two big double main event matches hyped up that this entire show was built around. That being Kazuchika Okada versus Bryan Danielson, the big dream match that closed out the show, and the IWGP US Championship match with Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, a rematch of their match earlier this year at Wrestle Kingdom at the Tokyo Dome. Both matches hyped up, you knew that they were going to deliver, and they did. I have to give the edge to one match over the other, that being Omega and Will Ospreay, who somehow managed to top themselves. I thought their match earlier this year at Wrestle Kingdom was a tremendous match and was already on my list, very high on my list, as far as one of the best matches of the entire year, if not my favorite match of the entire year. But they somehow came out here on this show in Toronto, Canada, and somehow managed to top even that match by putting on a classic here on this show. This was great. This was an excellent match with Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. It was a rematch, and it was all about Will Ospreay getting his revenge over not just Kenny Omega beating him at Wrestle Kingdom, but embarrassing him, busting him open, just completely decimating him the way he did. So Will Ospreay got a level of revenge in this match, and he did so by busting open Kenny Omega. He was bashing Kenny's head into the announce table repeatedly. The sound it was making was brutal. It was horrid, the way that he just kept bashing his head into the announce table. And Kenny came up bleeding. And at certain points, Will Ospreay, he was licking Kenny's blood. He had Kenny's blood on his arm. He licked the blood. The crowd was chanting, "You sick fuck," at him. Of course, this is a Canadian crowd, so they were firmly pro Kenny Omega, and there were pockets of cheers for Will Ospreay, but they were definitely anti-Will Ospreay by this point into the match, and especially by the point when Ospreay snatched a Canadian flag out of the front row and started flossing himself with it, as well as blowing his nose with it and sticking it up his nose. But this gave Kenny Omega some new life. He took down Ospreay, and then he managed to bust open Will Ospreay as well. He got him on the outside, and he started bashing his head into the steel steps. He hit him with a DDT on the steel steps, and much like at Wrestle Kingdom, Will Ospreay was a bloody mess, just leaking blood. There was already a pool of blood on the floor. Gross, but it was very fitting. We see blood so much on TV, especially in AEW, on AEW television. We see blood very regularly, so it gets to a point where you become numb to it. But then every now and then you'll see it used in a match like this where it's effective. These two guys, they don't like each other very much. They're at war here, going after this championship. They're trying to destroy each other, and so the blood from both of them was very effectively used in this match. At one point, Will Ospreay hit a Spanish fly. Of course, he got himself some good heat by locking Kenny Omega in the sharpshooter, which is always good when an anti-Canadian person locks in a sharpshooter. Always good for good heat. At one point, he went up to hit the Os Cutter, but as he came backwards, Omega caught him with a kick right to the back. So, at different points in this match, we see Omega get hit with the Os Cutter. And when he gets hit with the Os Cutter, He, of course, kicked out of it. But then some shenanigans started. And that's when Don Callis, he came back out. So Don Callis came out with Will Ospreay. He came with him along with his personal militarized security or whatever that he was talking about on Dynamite the previous week. Don Callis came out there. He interfered a little bit in the beginning, but then the referee threw him out instantly. I believe it was Paul Turner. Threw him out. Then Don Callis came back out. I guess he didn't throw him back out again. Whatever. So Don Callis was out there, and at one point he was holding on to Will Ospreay as Omega was trying to pull him back in the ring. Don Callis is on the outside pulling on Will Ospreay. So this leads to the referee going on the outside and trying to pull Don Callis off of Will Ospreay. But meanwhile, the referee, his vision is obscured, and Don Callis reaches into his pocket and pulls out a screwdriver and hands it to Will Ospreay. Omega gets Ospreay up, goes to hit him with the one-winged angel, but then Ospreay clocks him with the screwdriver right to the face, hits him with the hidden blade, and then hits him with Stormbreaker. But Omega got his foot on the ropes. I thought that was a very clever near fall. But it was not the last big near fall of this match. As much as I loved this match, I will say, and this probably will bother some other people more than it bothered me, but I will say there were probably a few too many kickouts of big moves that followed this point here. I understand not wanting to end the match here and you want a little extra juice to this match, but there's a couple of kickouts that probably was not all that necessary. Case in point, Will Ospreay got Kenny Omega up and he hit him with the one-winged angel. So he hit Kenny with his own move, and Kenny kicked out of the one-winged angel at 1. I don't know how often we've seen anyone in AEW kick out of the one-winged angel, but Kenny Omega was the one to do it here, and he kicked out at 1. So I thought that was insane, and the crowd loved it. They went absolutely insane for it. So then they start fighting again. Omega ends up hitting him with a brain buster. He goes to hit him with the one-winged angel, but he could tell Ospreay was maneuvering himself out of it, so he readjusts it into basically a fall-away German suplex, but it was only good for a 2 count. Ospreay gets back up, he recovers, they fight some more, and Ospreay hits Omega with a Tiger Driver 91, and oh my god, did this look brutal. This was a brutal move. He planted Omega right onto the back of his head and his neck. The way Omega landed looked ugly. It looked disgusting and scared the hell out of me. There were parts of this match that definitely scared me, but this one in particular scared the hell out of me. It just looked brutal the way that he landed on the back of his neck like that. And they continued to wrestle a little bit. Not very much longer, but they did continue to wrestle a little bit. But eventually Ospreay once again hit Omega with another hidden blade and hit the Stormbreaker again. And Will Ospreay regained the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship. Like I said, towards the end there, a couple of near falls, too far for my liking. It got a big pop, but I didn't necessarily need to see the kick out at 1 of the one-winged angel. You didn't necessarily need that spot, but I thought this match was great. Like I said, as much as I loved their first match at Wrestle Kingdom earlier this year, I thought this match was even better. And these two, man, they have that chemistry, that same chemistry that we saw with Omega and Okada all those years ago in their series of matches. That same energy, or that same type of energy and chemistry, exists here with Omega and Will Ospreay. They complement each other's matches, are brutal, and they're probably shaving years off of both men's careers. But goddamn, we are all lucky to be living in a time where Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega coexist in the same era and are mixing it up the way that they are. I enjoyed the hell out of this match, And I'm ready for thirds. I am ready to see them run this match back. They have All In at Wembley Stadium in London. You gotta go for a third round. Throw a stipulation on there like best 2 out of 3 falls or something like that. You gotta give us this match for a third time. And it don't matter who wins. I just need to see this match for a third time. This was tremendous stuff. And even though there's only 2 matches that followed this one, nothing really could follow it. There was a buffer match, but then the big main event, the show closer of this pay-per-view, was the dream match between Kazuchika Okada and Bryan Danielson. These two had a great match to close out the show. It was paced differently than the Omega Ospreay match was. That one was much faster paced, a lot more high intensity and really in your face action there, a lot more brutal. Although Danielson and Okada had many brutal spots in this match too. It was paced a little bit slower, and the crowd was definitely into it. There were loud chants for Okada. There were loud chants for Danielson, and I'm kind of burying the lead here. One of the biggest highlights of this entire match is that Bryan Danielson, in his entrance, made his entrance to the theme song of Final Countdown by Europe. If you are a long time Bryan Danielson fan, all the way back to his Ring of Honor days, you know that his classic Ring of Honor theme song, a lot of people were hoping that would be his theme song when he initially came to AEW. But if you're in the know, then you know the whole situation with getting the rights to the song and the band Europe and that whole situation. But recently, I think within these last couple of days, within this last week or so, the rights to the song became available, or at least became a lot more available than they were before. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm known and aware of it earlier in the day, but once it became official, they had to jump on that opportunity, and they definitely took advantage of it here. It was really cool hearing the crowd sing along to that theme song for Danielson. But back to the match itself, I thought it was a great match. It was a little slower paced. The crowd was into it. They were firmly behind Okada and Danielson and a lot of the big spots that they were doing here, but you could still tell, even with the buffer trios match that happened to give them a chance to rest, they were still not as into this match as they were into a lot of the stuff that Omega and Will Ospreay were doing. But then again, there was nothing dramatic that Okada and Danielson did in this match that really held up to what Ospreay and Omega were doing. And now that the show is over, and there was no big angle, there was no shocking debut, no big return or anything like that for either match, it does beg the question of, would this show have been better off if Omega and Ospreay had closed out instead of Danielson and Okada? Would their match, Danielson and Okada's match, would that match have been better off if they went on a couple of matches before and Omega and Ospreay had the closing spot? I'm not sure. But like I said, it was still a great main event with Okada and Danielson. We had a very scary sequence here where they were on the outside and Okada ended up hitting Danielson with a tombstone on the rampway. Then he gets him back in the ring and Danielson is convulsing. He's convulsing. He's showing signs of potentially seizing or having a seizure of some kind. The referee calls for Doc Samson to come in and check on him. He checks on him. Okada's like, fuck that, I don't care. He shoos the doctor away, puts the referee away, and he gets Bryan back up, tries to hit him with the Rainmaker, but then Danielson ducks it. It was all a ruse to the shock of no one, and he ends up hitting Okada with the running Busaiku knee, but it was only good for a 2 count. I know not everyone's going to be a fan of them faking out with a seizure or convulsing or whatever it is, especially it's a sensitive topic, knowing Bryan Danielson's history with concussions and all that, I didn't really take offense to it. I didn't have an issue with it. I really looked at it like just Danielson fucking around and playing possum with Okada. And that's exactly what it was. But I didn't really have a strong issue with it. But it was pretty brutal. The tombstone, at least, on the floor was pretty brutal. So the two men, they're mixing it up. Of course, eventually Okada does manage to catch Bryan with the Rainmaker, and it was beautiful. They did the full thing. He hit him with the Rainmaker, but it was only good for a 2 count. And then Okada goes to hit the Rainmaker again, but then Danielson countered it, and then he managed to power Okada down into position to lock him in the label lock. Okada is fighting his way out of it. He's trying to get out of it, but while doing so, Danielson is outmaneuvering Okada, and he's able to maneuver himself into a position to lock Okada in a different submission hold. This hold is stretching back and wrenching back on Okada's arms and his shoulders, and perhaps the biggest shocker of the entire night, Danielson wins, but he wins by cleanly tapping out Okada. Okada, in this shoulder and arm submission hold, whatever it is, he ends up tapping out, and Bryan Danielson gets the victory clean by tapping out Okada. I definitely did not see that coming. Going into this match, I predicted a Bryan Danielson win. I was not surprised to see Danielson get a win. I was very surprised to see him tap out Okada as cleanly as he did. So again, this match was great. I just think in terms of the big match that will define this show, I think the honors go to Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. But Okada and Danielson had a damn good match. And much like Ospreay and Omega, I want to see a rematch between these guys. And with these guys, I need to see that shit in the Tokyo Dome. Or I need to see it in Japan. That this rematch belongs on a New Japan show and a big New Japan event. I can only think of Wrestle Kingdom next year. I'm willing to wait. I am willing to wait, but I would love to see these guys mix it up again, because as great as this match was, I know in my heart they can do even better. And with a fresher crowd, with different circumstances, what have you, as great as this match was, and it lived up to the hype for me in terms of seeing these guys finally compete against each other after all these years. Seeing these two finally compete against each other, it was great to see. But I know they could do even better. And I know I'm greedy. I want more. And I do. I want to see these guys mix it up again. And I want to see it at a New Japan show. So, outside of those two big matches, I mean, those are easily 2 match of the year candidates right there. There was a rest of the card. In fact, there were 2 world championship matches that took place on this show. The show opened with a world title match. MJF defending the AEW World Championship against Hiroshi Tanahashi. Before anyone gets upset over the show opening with a world championship match, it's very easy to do so. I'm not the biggest fan of seeing pay-per-views open with world title matches, but it made sense character-wise for MJF to want to open the show, because he wanted to get out of this arena and get out of this city and not stick around and wait around all night as, in his words, this indie fed from Japan had their indie wrestlers competing all night. So it made sense. MJF Tanahashi had a very simple match. It was a very simple heel babyface classic match. Tanahashi, he's older, he's a little slower, his knees are not 100%. So this was not a classic Tanahashi great outing, but he still can go out there and go, and the fans still love the hell out of this guy. And MJF, who the fans were cheering for at different points, he knows how to get great heat, and he played off of that very well in this match. And even the finish, it was just a classic heel MJF finish where the referee ended up getting distracted, and MJF used the Dynamite Diamond Ring on Tanahashi behind the ref's back, got the 1-2-3, and retained his championship. And he was out of there. We didn't hear a peep from MJF later on. In fact, he posted on Twitter later on that he was leaving, and he left. So that was that. A simple match to open the show. And the other World Championship match on this show, as far as the men is concerned, was the IWGP Heavyweight Championship match. Sanada defending the championship against Jungle Boy. Heading into this show, I did not really view this match as a World Championship caliber match, but I knew that these two would have a good match, and they did. It was good. That's as much as I can say about it. It was good. There was nothing really memorable about it, and quite frankly, it was just a backdrop. Sanada got the win. He won the championship. It was a bit of a flat finish, but he did retain his championship. But no one's going to remember this show for the match that Jungle Boy and Sanada had. They're going to remember it for what happened after the match. So in this match, Jungle Boy was accompanied at ringside by his new partner and newfound friend in Hook. And as the two men were leaving together, and as Hook was giving Jungle Boy his props, and he was holding up his arms, very un-Hook-like to be this open with someone else, which I'm sure will play into the story going forward. But as they're going up the ramp, they even were cutting back over to the announcers, and this came, and for a second when they did, I was like, oh, we're not going to get the turn, we're not going to get the moment, but they were making it seem pretty real here. And Jungle Boy was feigning like he was hurt. Hook helped him up, and then when they posed for the crowd, Jungle Boy, Jack Perry, lowered the boom, and he clotheslined the hell out of Hook, put him down, and the heel turn has arrived. People have been talking about Jungle Boy turning heel, and the talk has really ramped up a lot over these last couple of weeks, ever coming out of Double or Nothing, and a lot of people saw this coming a mile away. I did as well, but it still made for a really cool moment. The crowd reacted to it huge. They booed the hell out of Jack Perry, and Taz was still on commentary at this point, and Taz reacted as perfectly as he could. Taz's reaction definitely helped elevate this moment. Jungle Boy, he was taunting the crowd, he was playing out to the crowd, so he's already getting in the gear for this heel turn. And so I say go all the way. No more Tarzan Boy. You gotta drop the Jungle Boy name. Maybe cut the hair, or at least do something different with the hair. Get a little trim up, change the gear up, and you're not gonna hear anything brand new here. A lot of other people have already been saying this. Pair him up with Anna Jay. She ain't doing anything. She's still technically with the Jericho Appreciation Society, I guess. When's the last time you saw her appear on TV with those guys? So have her be with Jungle Boy like some arm candy. Give us Hollywood Jack Perry. Drop the Jungle Boy shit. Have him present himself in a new way. And pair him up with Anna Jay. I even saw people throw out the idea of Don Callis, if he's going to form some type of faction, have Jack Perry join up with that too. I don't think that's a terrible idea. You can have Don Callis do all the talking for him. I think that would be a pretty good direction to go with them. Because that's going to be the big thing now. The trigger has been pulled, and now we have a heel turn for Jungle Boy. But how will he be? How will he react? How will his character react to this heel turn? Does he have the chops to go out there and cut a heel promo? Does he have the chops to work as a heel? All that stuff. Like, we got to see what his abilities are as far as playing up the role. Will he be believable in the role as a heel? I don't imagine him being much of a badass, so he might be more in line with a cocky little shit. It'd be interesting if they paired him back up with Christian and Luchasaurus. I don't think they will, but that could be an interesting direction they go in. It's worth considering. But we'll see how well he does in the role. Speaking of heels, one of the biggest heels of the night was someone who's technically not even a heel, and that is CM Punk. CM Punk, of course, He is back, and he is not in Chicago anymore. The last time I was on here with you guys, I was talking about the debut of Collision at the United Center in Chicago, where CM Punk came out and was welcomed with open arms by the Chicago fans. Well, they're in Canada. They're in Toronto. And on Collision the previous night, he did not get that same warm welcome, and it was even worse on this show tonight. The Toronto fans were not quite fond of CM Punk, but kudos to them. They played into it in CM Punk's match with Satoshi Kojima in the first round of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. CM Punk here against Kojima. They had a pretty good match, and Punk was playing the heel role. He was a complete prick in this match, and he was antagonizing the crowd in every way imaginable, and I thought it worked here. I like that. They're not ignoring it. They're not trying to have Punk be someone he's not. This is who CM Punk is. This is just another side of him that we do not often see. Now, he's not full-fledged heel yet, but he was toting that line, and he was playing it up in this match. Kojima, he hung in there. Kojima's a legend. He's an old-school guy. He can still go. The man's in his 50s, but he can still go, and these two had a really good match, but there was no doubt how this was going to end. CM Punk got the win with the GTS, and he moves on in the Owen Hart Cup. On his side of the bracket, he will eventually face the winner of a match between Samoa Joe and Roderick Strong. That's coming up on the episode of Collision this upcoming week. So we could eventually see CM Punk versus Samoa Joe, because I firmly believe Joe's going to win that match. So we could gear up to see CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. On the other side of the bracket, we got Ricky Starks taking on Juice Robinson and Powerhouse Hobbs taking on Dustin Rhodes. It should come down to Hobbs and Starks, with, honestly, I have no problem with Hobbs winning, but I think it'll go Starks' way. And we could eventually get a finals of Starks versus either CM Punk or Samoa Joe. If you ask me, I would prefer it be Samoa Joe and see Samoa Joe getting to the finals for the second year in a row. And this time, Ricky Starks is the one to beat him, because if anyone in this tournament outside of Hobbs deserves the win, it's Ricky Starks. And the women also had a match on this show too. Athena beat Billy Starks, I believe her name is, in the 0 hour pre-show. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I just know of a certain couple of finishes and outcomes in the 0 hour pre-show. And I know Athena, she moved along in that tournament too. And as far as the women is concerned, my pick is Willow Nightingale. So just throwing that out there. Speaking of Willow, nice transition. She challenged Toni Storm for the AEW Women's World Championship. This was a pretty fun match. Again, the outcome never really in doubt. I am going with Willow to be the winner of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. So she didn't really need to win here. Toni Storm beat her. She retained her championship, which is good because she needs to hold on to that championship so she can drop it right back to Jamie Hayter at All In London in August. So good here. We had a bunch of multi-person matches. We had a fatal four-way for the AEW International Championship. Orange Cassidy, Katsuyori Shibata, Zack Sabre Jr., and Daniel Garcia. This was a pretty fun match. Not a huge shock what the outcome was. Orange Cassidy, he's been flying by through the skin of his teeth with this championship. He has just found a way to win every single time, and this night it was no different. I didn't see any of the three guys as being the right person to take the championship from him, so an Orange Cassidy win was not much of a shock here, and he got the win. He retained his championship after Garcia took out Zack Sabre Jr., and then Shibata hit the PK on Garcia, and then OC came in and shoved Shibata out of the way and got a crucifix pin on Daniel Garcia to retain his championship. And after the match, there was a face-off with all the champions that were in this match, because while it was only OC's title that was on the line, you also had Zack Sabre Jr., who's the New Japan TV champion, and you had Shibata, who's the Ring of Honor Pure champion. So I don't know if this three-way face-off here was teasing a potential triple threat winner-take-all match down the line. I don't really have interest in that, but it is what it is. We had a big 10-man tag team match with the Elite, Hangman, Adam Page, and the Young Bucks teaming up with Eddie Kingston and Tomohiro Ishii, taking on the Blackpool Combat Club, Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta, and Konosuke Takeshita, and New Japan's Shooter Shota Umino. Of course, the protege of Jon Moxley. Up until Ospreay and Omega, this was my favorite match of the show. This was great. This was a fun tag team match. We get these multi-man matches all the time, and they almost mean nothing, but on this show, this was fun. This was a blast. The face-off with Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley in this match was great. They had a chop fest, which we see a lot. We even saw it in certain matches on this show. We see it a lot on AEW pay-per-views. I don't know about WWE. It wouldn't shock me, especially with Gunther going around. I'm sure we see it there too. It's an epidemic of it. There are certain spots that are completely overdone in wrestling, and the chop fest is one of them. But even still, it was still fun to see it, especially at a certain point when all the other guys were brawling and there were dives and stuff, and still Moxley and Kingston were chopping the shit out of each other. I thought that was entertaining. But, of course, Eddie Kingston's thoughts on Moxley right now are a little conflicted, because a little bit later on, when the Bucks were running wild with their super kick party, they went to deliver a double super kick on Moxley, but Eddie Kingston didn't really take a bullet for him, but he pushed him out of the way, so he got to avoid it. So, even though they're on opposing sides, Eddie still has conflicted feelings towards Jon Moxley. No conflicted feelings on Claudio, though. He hates him. He hates Claudio Castagnoli, and that was proven further in this match. Takeshita was a big standout in this match. Shota Umino, he had his stuff too, but Konosuke Takeshita, he was definitely a big standout in this match. At one point, he knocked Ishii out cold with a forearm, which looked pretty brutal. So good on him. And I thought this match was set up for him to get the big win, but that's not at all what happened. After everyone pretty much laid each other out, it came down to Ishii and Wheeler Yuta, and Ishii hit him with a big lariat and then a brainbuster and got the win for the babyfaces. So that shocked me. Did not see that coming. I thought for sure this was going to end with Takeshita getting the win, but he didn't get pinned, so I guess he's fine. And the other big tag match on this show, this was the buffer between the two main events. It was the team of Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Minoru Suzuki taking on Sting, Darby Allin, and Tetsuya Naito. The first time we had Sting and Chris Jericho facing off in a ring together, and this match was pretty clunky. This was probably the weakest match on the entire show. There was a spot with Sting getting hit with a cutter that looked not great. He didn't look like he took it the best way, and I don't know if that affected the later spot where he was laid out on a table. Sammy dove onto the table. It looked like Sting was supposed to move, but he didn't really move. He got put through the table by Sammy, but Sammy was still down, and Sting got right back up and continued the match. So that looked weird. Naito pinned Suzuki to get the win for Team Sting, pretty much. So the less said about it, the better. It was a pretty clunky match and was probably the weakest thing on the entire show. But it was not enough to bring this show down at all. This was still a very fun pay-per-view. Those two main events alone made this worth the price of admission and made it worth the price of the ticket, the price of the pay-per-view, what have you. This was great shit. 2 years in a row, Forbidden Door is one of, if not the best wrestling pay-per-view of the entire year. And unlike last year, which was ravaged by a bunch of injuries and just poor timing with different things, this year was stacked with some heavy star power with Danielson and Okada, Omega and Ospreay, Tanahashi, MJF, all that stuff. Great stuff from AEW and New Japan all night long. And one of those nights that makes me very proud to be a fan of pro wrestling. And that's always a good thing. So, if you have thoughts on this show, go ahead and share them. Leave a comment down below what you thought of this show, what was your favorite match, and where do you see things going in the future. And of course, as always, if you like what you see, you like what you hear, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and follow me on Twitter at DerekJ Speaks. I will be back to you within the next week for WWE Money in the Bank, live from the O2 Arena in London, covering the Bloodline Civil War tag team match, and of course 2 big Money in the Bank ladder matches, so stay tuned for that. Until then, have a good rest of your night. This was a long show. It is now very late as I'm recording this, so it's time to upload this, deal with that, and get some sleep. So until next time, take care.